Hi all, this is Dr. Tim Haslag talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to actually talk to you about whether European degrees are actually recognized in the United States. And if you're going and doing a graduate degree, for example, if you're an undergraduate student from someplace in Europe, or maybe you're from Asia or something like that, and you're interested in doing a PhD in the United States or some graduate school in the United States, whether your degrees are actually going to be recognized. And in general, if you're coming from basically a legitimate university, wherever that is around the world, yes. And the reason is that most people, and so if you don't know, I'm actually a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. Most programs that are interested in recruiting students are going to pride themselves on diversity, particularly in a business school. We're going to say that we actually recruit from people all around the world, and we're recruiting the best possible people there are around the world. That's great, right? If you're coming from certain universities or certain countries, for example, there might be, there is from any place, right? That it doesn't matter where you're from, there is going to be a level of due diligence that has to go through. So graduate officers are going to have to go through and double check to make sure that your GMAT scores, that's the entrance sort of, it's like an SAT sort of thing for business. If that is, or your GRE scores are legitimate, if your transcripts are legitimate, there's going to be people that are going to double check that, and they're just sort of checking their bases. But for the people that are actually picking the people that are going through and sort of picking individuals that are interested in graduate school, it's going to look very favorably on the institution where people are. If they're recruiting from the best universities in the UK, if they're recruiting from the best universities from, I don't know, maybe it is the Ukraine or Poland or wherever, right? If it's the best university in that particular location, then it's going to be very, very positive. Or maybe you can show that you're actually the best student, you have the highest scores in your particular country in one particular location or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be fantastic, right? That's the general gist of it. What people look for is, are these great students, are they going to perform? And are these people actually going to perform and make this particular institution, wherever that institution is in the United States, are they going to make them look very successful? And that's at the bottom line, that's really all it is. So no matter what institution you're at, there are people from around the world, and that is actually a very good thing. That's a positive sign that people are pulling and recruiting from around the world. If that particular institution has PhD students from, I don't know, wherever it is. Maybe it is students that went to Cambridge, or students that went to INSEAD, or Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, or University of Beijing, or wherever it is, right? If they're recruiting the best students from those particular universities to go to that particular institution, then that's a really positive sign, right? And universities are going to pride themselves on that. Now, granted, there's a couple of things that you should know if you are pursuing a PhD in the United States, particularly in business administration. It doesn't matter what program it is, but that's my experience, right? So I know this a little bit more than other particular areas, right? So first thing is, and this is even for people that are in the United States. I didn't know that. I'm actually Canadian, and now that I've worked in the United States, I know this a little bit more. So just kind of give you my inside view. And there is what's called in-state and out-of-state tuition. So in-state tuition is those people that actually live and have residency in the particular state where the university is. And that's going to be much more, it's going to be at a much greater discount than out-of-state people. So, for example, if you're in Georgia and you live in Georgia and your residency is there, and it has been for it's X number of years. I think it depends on the state. I don't quote me on that, but I think it depends on the state and how long you actually lived in that particular location, how it counts as in-state. So if you are a resident from Georgia and you go to the University of Georgia, for example, that in-state tuition is going to be very, very inexpensive. But then if you are somebody that's from Alabama, which is the state that's close by, and then you go to the University of Georgia, well, then the out-of-state tuition is going to be ridiculous. It's going to be very, very high. And so most of the time, the people that are getting in-state tuition, they're paying a far better discount. So you want to look into that, make sure it's actually affordable in terms of in-state and out-of-state tuition, because a PhD is a long time, or any graduate school is a long time. So you want to make sure it's affordable for you. And sometimes there's kind of tricks that happen that you can maybe play up, and it depends. Again, I think it's really state specific. So if you move to a state and you live there, so if you're going to University of Michigan and you live there for a couple of years, I don't know what the exact limit is, but then you can qualify for in-state tuition. So that could be sort of a game that you can play to qualify for in-state tuition if you're thinking about that. You just have to live in that particular location for a while, and I think, don't quote me on this, I think as well as being, part of, maybe it is a resident of the United States as well. So you need a green card. So that's one thing to think about in terms of that. So that brings me to the second point. I'll leave that for the fourth point. The next one is sort of the second point, that if you are underrepresented in some way in the United States, so you can look at sort of underrepresented groups in the United States. I'm not going to sort of label that at this moment, but if you're one of those particular members, then you can sort of, there's going to be emphasis for people that are underrepresented. So you might want to emphasize that in your, your doctoral thesis or your statement, right? Your admissions statement of whatever you're looking at, right? So for example, maybe you are, you're a paraplegic, for example, right? And you're interested in going to graduate school. Well, make sure that people know that you're a paraplegic in that statement. That's going to help out, because, we are all about diversity, right? And that's a really important thing for most programs, to look at that kind of stuff and to make sure that it is as diverse as possible, right? So there is definitely things that happen with that. And, don't quote me on that at every single institution. And even on my own institution, by the way, I shouldn't sort of, any of this is, it's my own personal statements. It doesn't sort of represent of my own institution. So you want to make sure that you just make sure things are favorable as much as you possibly can for yourself, right? So you want to emphasize that kind of stuff, and that could be part of your statement, right? That's an important thing. The third thing that you want to think about is that there is a liability of foreignness. So if those of you who have a little bit of, maybe you did an MBA, you would talk about the liability of foreignness. Businesses deal with this. You're kind of a mini business when you are you're a graduate student and you're thinking about yourself in terms of what you're going to do in terms of productivity, right? So there's this thing called the liability of foreignness. And any time that you go to a different location, you don't know the location as well as the sort of local people, and the local people don't know you as much. So there's a liability, and it's really a huge part of it is just due to information asymmetries. You just don't know what's going on. You don't know where to go to. You don't know, right, what's the best scholarships to actually look for and all that kind of stuff. There is that's going to happen, right? Any place that you go to and you're thinking about that, you're going to miss different things. Just take that as a given and just run with it, right? That's going to happen to you. And there's going to be some liability of foreignness. I experienced that even as a Canadian in the United States. When I went to the United States, there definitely was a liability of foreignness, at least for a couple of years. Probably 4 years, actually, to be honest, before I started figuring out a lot of different things. I'm like, oh, that's why that happens. Or this, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But before I was like, that's really bizarre. Why is that the case, right? So even things like healthcare, for example, there's going to be strange things and you're like, oh, why is that happening? And you're not going to understand why that is. Just kind of run with it and deal with it. So yeah, that's actually one thing to look into if you're going to a program. But basically, if you go into a lot of graduate programs, you're going to make sure that you do have healthcare. But that's one thing to look into and make sure that that's an important thing you look into. And this brings me to the fourth point. This thing I wanted to talk about is that in terms of visas and green cards, you have to make sure that's all straightened out. But there is, at every single university, there's going to be somebody that's going to help you out. They have a team at most major universities to help you out if you're coming in from a different country. I had that at my institution. They were wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and every major university is going to have something like that to make your life easier. As a graduate student, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to get any sort of green card immediately. Don't quote me on that again. I'm not a lawyer. But, that's just one thing to look at. And that's just, you have to sort of dig into that yourself and make sure that you're well aware and get some help. But when you're applying, don't worry about that kind of stuff at the beginning, right? Like that'll sort itself out as you're sort of going through and, getting, once you actually get the yes, then you could sort of figure out the different, all that kind of stuff, the immigration stuff that happens along the way. And the fifth thing that I really want to emphasize is that the competition is a lot more steeper than you think it is in terms of getting into a particular university. And maybe you're going to do a PhD in the United States, in the US. Or maybe you're thinking of doing a PhD in Canada or wherever it is. Maybe you're going from America to someplace in Europe, for example. Well, there's going to be a lot more competition you think that there's going to be. So just make sure that you are putting your best foot forward and making sure that you're as awesome as you possibly can, right? So most universities do get applications from all over the world. That's not unusual. Don't just kind of mail it in. If you're going to do this and you're thinking about doing a PhD, take it seriously. If you're thinking about doing research in a particular area, take it seriously. Write a terrible application. They just get thrown out right away. It doesn't, it's not really, or maybe it won't get thrown out, but people are just not going to pay attention to it, right? So you want to make sure that you look outstanding in every possible way that you can, and make sure that you are going to rock it, right? So that you are going to look spectacular, and you want to do that kind of stuff. That's important. So that is all I wanted to talk about, those 5 different things, as well as, are European degrees recognized in the United States? Absolutely. Are any degree that's offered around the world, are they going to be well recognized in the same way as some place that they do know in the United States? Maybe not. Is a degree that's going to be recognized? Are there degrees in the United States that are well recognized? Maybe not, right? So it just depends, and it really just depends on the legitimacy that you actually have, or the legitimacy of the degree, and that's going to matter a lot in terms of getting into graduate school and getting a research position or something like that. If you're doing a PhD or thinking of doing a PhD in the United States, that's going to really matter going forward. So it's up to you to show, and up to you to go to programs in your undergraduate programs that are completely legitimate, that people are going to be interested in that, and that are going to make yourself look very, very good. So that's all I wanted to talk about. And if you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care. Bye.